So, hello everybody, good morning. This is the third webinar for this winter, the third webinar hosted by the CRESEM Laboratory from the University of Perpignan. My name is Laurent Botti. I am Associate Professor in Tourism Management, and I will be the moderator today. So for this webinar, the program is very interesting with Professor Gangli on the topic of corporate social responsibility and small tourism enterprises performance, two empirical studies. So Gang is Professor of Tourism Economics in University of Surrey. He is the Director of International Relations of this university and Director of the Center for Competitiveness of the Visitor Economy, the COVE. Professor Lee serves on the editorial board of several journals, including the three top journals, which are Tourism Management, Annals of Tourism Research, and Journal of Travel Research, plus Tourism Economics. Professor Lee is also a member of the Executive Committee of the International Association for Tourism Economics, and everybody here knows that the next conference for this association will held in Perpignan next July. So Professor Lee authored many publications on economic analysis and forecasting of tourism demand, economic impact of the visitor economy, tourism competitiveness, and quantitative methods in tourist behavior studies. For today, it's your expertise concerning tourism firms and small enterprises that you will share with us. And for this lecture, you will present us two papers. First, a paper published in Journal of Sustainable Tourism in 2019, and a paper published the same year in Journal of Travel Research. So if you have questions, you can use the chat box to leave it, and Professor Lee may answer your question after his presentation. So Gang, if it's okay for you, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Laurent. Let me share my screen.
It's okay. We can see your screen.
Okay, great.
And it's full screen. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you very much, Laurent, for inviting me to this webinar, and thank you for your kind introduction. As Laurent just explained, I'm going to share with two pieces of my recent research based on the similar topic and the same data set. The topic I'm going to cover today is about corporate social responsibility and the small tourism enterprises performance. And I put these two studies in the context of tourism economics, which is the main field of my, my research. And I would like to just briefly start by locating my study in the broad field of economics. As we know, tourism economics is an applied branch of economics. So between theoretical economics and applied economics, we basically can apply a number of classical economic theories to study tourism phenomena, including industrial economics, managerial economics, microeconomics, macroeconomics, international economics, so on and so forth. So these are all the different applied fields of economics. And this study basically fits into the first two sub-branches, industrial economics and managerial economics. Very briefly, microeconomics mostly focused on tourism demand studies, about the tourism elasticities, and macroeconomics in the tourism field basically focused on tourism-like economic growth, how tourism contributes to economic development of a destination. While international economics focuses on inbound, outbound international tourism, and particularly apply international trade theories to understand the international tourism flows between different territories. The environmental economics in tourism has some unique characteristics. So environment is not only regarded as a production factor. In tourism, environment itself is part of a tourism product. So this is the unique aspects of applying environmental economics to study tourism phenomena. Then the last two, industrial economics and managerial economics, are most relevant to the topic today. The industrial economics focus on the firm issues, including small businesses, lifestyle entrepreneurship, which are very common in tourism. And that's why I pick up this topic today. With regard to managerial economics, the focus is mostly on the corporate social responsibility and the tourism strategies. And again, I'm going to bring the CSR and the small business together. So the topics, the two studies today really cut between industrial economics and managerial economics. So the first study is about social responsibility towards community and the small tourism enterprises performance. So the social responsibility towards community is one particular aspect of social corporate responsibility, CSR. So we focus on one particular aspect of CSR and link this aspect of CSR with the small business performance in tourism context. And the second study basically followed from the first study, looking at the whole range of corporate social responsibility, but with a unique angle. We look at corporate or entrepreneurial motivation. Some people run their small businesses or their small enterprises as a lifestyle choice. So we basically looked at a lifestyle-oriented motivation, how this motivation may affect the conduct of a firm, i.e. the corporate social responsibility, and further linked to the firm's performance. So these are the two interrelated studies. Let me start with the first one. So as Laurent explained, the first study has been published in International Journal of Tourism Research. So if anyone is interested in any of these two studies, feel free to read the full paper. So this paper focused on the specific aspects, so corporate social responsibility towards the community. So let's start with some background of the study. Why are we interested in this topic? So firstly, the small businesses, as we know, basically account for a large share of firms in tourism hospitality context. There are a small number of international big companies like hotel chains or a few big tour operators, but most of the other firms are rather small, local. So they are either just the small restaurants or small inns or B&Bs. So these are very, very small businesses compared to the large international hotel chains. And in terms of the number of these firms, they basically are the majority of tourism and hospitality businesses. Although they are small, they are very, very important. Basically, they are connected with the local community. They serve the community. They solve the local employment issues. They hire people from the local community. And they also basically have the vegetables or wines supplied from the local community. Therefore, the small firms' survival relied on the community, and also at the same time, they serve the community in a very close way. So this is the connection between small tourism businesses and the local community. Social responsibility towards community, as I mentioned, is one particular aspect of corporate social responsibility. And this aspect is also very important for small tourism enterprises improving their performance. As I mentioned already, small businesses normally different from the large international hotel chains. Small businesses do not have a lot of financial resources, do not have capital. Therefore, they very much rely on other aspects such as social capital, which means the strong connection with the local community. Therefore, having a good relationship with the local community is very important for the small tourism enterprises' survival and their success, so affecting their performance. And here, for some students who don't have much knowledge about corporate social responsibility, here I just give a very basic definition. So CSR is a self-regulating business model that helps a company to be socially accountable to itself, its stakeholders, and the public. By practicing corporate social responsibilities, firms can be conscious of the kind of the impact they have on all aspects of the society, including economic, social, and environmental aspects. So from the corporate social responsibility definition, we can see it means the connection or the interaction between a firm and the society. And for this study, I focus particularly on the community. So we mentioned that CSR is very important for the small tourism businesses' performance, but we cannot regard CSR as a guaranteed formula for small business successes. This is because, firstly, not all small businesses support their communities. So not all individual small firms have a good relationship with the community, or they may have the wish they would like to support the community, but they do not have resources. They do not have enough money to, let's say, sponsor a local festival or a community activity. So therefore, in the end, not all small businesses exercise corporate social responsibilities. And the influence of corporate social responsibilities on a company performance also vary depending on different sizes of the company, different nature of the company, different sectors or industries that the company is located in, and is affected by many other factors, which means by exercising corporate social responsibility, it doesn't necessarily mean the firm, the company can benefit, especially financially, because exercising corporate social responsibility means the company needs to bring some financial contribution to the community, to the society, to the environment. And this may add additional cost or reduce the profit margin. So in the end, for doing some corporate social responsibility activities, the companies may not necessarily receive some positive returns. Therefore, the empirical evidence from previous literature is a mix. Some companies receive positive return from their investment in CSR activities, but not all of them. And most of the corporate social responsibility studies focus on big companies, especially those listed companies in the stock markets. And partially because the data are easily available or publicly available. Therefore, researchers can get access to the big companies' financial performance data. They can link the CSR activities and those listed companies' performance. However, it's very, very difficult and extremely challenging to research the small businesses' CSR behavior. This is partially because of the data availability issue, especially the secondary data. Therefore, many studies who would like to concentrate on small business studies, looking at their social corporate responsibilities, will have to use the primary data. And some studies use the interview data, look at the qualitative aspects of the relationship between CSR and performance. And very, very few studies focused on the quantitative aspects of CSR's impact on small firms' performance. And our study is one among those very few studies. So based on this background, our question is, for small tourism businesses, do they exercise corporate social responsibility? And what type of corporate social responsibilities these small tourism businesses would like to concentrate on, and how do they exercise the corporate social responsibilities. So these are the questions we try to review in our study. Then the objectives of this study. What are we researching in this study? The influence of social responsibility towards community on small tourism enterprises' performance in a Chinese context is the objective, the main aim of this study. In particular, we look at multiple dimensions of corporate social responsibility towards community. And then we look at the different influences of different dimensions of social responsibility towards community on these small tourism businesses' performance. So to elaborate a little bit further, I mentioned on the last slide, corporate social responsibility has multiple dimensions, and the community is only one of the dimensions. The other dimensions include the environment, the product, the employees, so different aspects of CSR. This study focuses on just the community aspects of CSR. And within the community aspects of CSR, there are also multiple dimensions. So this is what we are going to have the insights into CSR conduct in the small tourism companies context. So this is our primary objective of this study. The second objective is to look at the moderating effects of small tourism enterprises owners' demographic variables, gender, education, so on and so forth. And in particular, we have the upper echelon theory, which is a very classical theory used to explain why the big companies adopt corporate social responsibility and explain why the executive board's demographic variables count or matters for the big companies' CSR. So we have some theoretical support, but the upper echelon theory is typically used just for the big company cases. We would like to adopt the theory to the small tourism businesses context and see whether the small tourism enterprises owners' demographic variables will affect the impact of CSR on performance, whether we can still use the upper echelon theory to explain this phenomenon. Secondly, we would like to contribute to the CSR literature by looking at how the small tourism businesses' CSR performance can be explained by the large firm theory. Again, we focus on the upper echelon theory. So in this perspective, we are aiming to enrich the theoretical foundation of a small tourism business CSR. So that is the background of the study. Now let me look at the literature background, the theoretical background of the study. Small tourism enterprises and their performance. Small businesses normally have multiple operational goals, and the key role of the owners is very important for their performance. And the firm managerial incompetence is another challenge which may affect small businesses' performance. So the owner's operation and the management capabilities, this will affect whether the small business can do well or not. So for small businesses, the owner plays very important role in terms of deciding whether the company will adopt the CSR strategy and whether the small company's performance will be satisfactory or not. Second point, the success and the resilience capacity of small businesses. Now, this is also a very important aspect. Having a very positive, harmonious relationship with the local community may help the small businesses to mitigate their operational risks and gain the ability of resilience. We mentioned at the beginning, small businesses have little capital, and they lack resources. Therefore, their survival is very fragile. If there are some external shocks, for example, if there are some economic crisis, then the small businesses will be hit the most. People can often discuss about the impact of COVID-19 on tourism hospitality businesses, especially the small businesses like restaurants. So many of us have already seen the failures of a lot of local restaurants or small businesses. So this is the same reason. Small businesses do not have, firstly, the managerial capabilities, secondly, financial resources. Therefore, they are very volatile. And then having a good relationship with the community, have a community support as your main customer base. This will help the local small businesses to mitigate such risks. So once there are some external shocks or financial resources, financial crisis, then if the small businesses can still maintain a relatively stable customer basis from the local community, then they may survive such crisis. Therefore, having good relationship with community is very important for small businesses' successes and survival. Talking about the performance, when we measure a big company's performance, we typically use the financial indicators, the profit rate, the return on investment, those financial indicators. When we measure small businesses' performance, in addition to using some classical financial indicators, it's also very important to use the subjective measurement. So the owner's own perception, whether they feel they are satisfied with their small business performance, whether the performance has already met their expectation. These are very important aspects of performance measurement for small firms. And this is the difference. So in this study, we introduced the two aspects of performance measurements. One is the classical, we call objective measurement. They are financial indicators. And then we introduce the subjective measurement, which is basically some non-financial indicators. Now let's continue to look at the small tourism enterprises' social responsibility towards the community and the influencing factors. As I mentioned at the beginning, there have been very little research looking at small businesses' corporate social responsibility. Very, very few studies. And in the tourism context, these studies are even fewer. The factors for small tourism enterprises, basically from the very limited research, we can find some empirical evidence. Some research, such as Howlack and the colleagues in 2015, they found the time the owner spent living and working in a community. Basically, this factor is a very important influencing factor of the small tourism businesses' social responsibility. And when we look at the literature beyond small tourism enterprises, when we look at in other sectors, we found the owner's demographic information, such as gender, education, age, and some other variables will affect the small businesses' conduct of CSR, corporate social responsibility. So in this study, we would like to answer these questions. Are there any new factors specific to the Chinese context when we look at Chinese small tourism enterprises? So in this study, we use those small inns or B&B, those type of accommodation. as our research context in China. So apart from what has been found in the literature, like gender, education, age, these factors of the owner's demographics, are there any other variables specifically relevant to the Chinese context? We are trying to find some out. And what is the moderating effect of these factors on the consequences of community social responsibility? So we know these demographic variables, firstly, will affect small firms' adoption of CSR strategy. And also we mentioned these small firms owners' capability, their educational background will also affect their business performance. So on the top of this direct relation between the owner's demographic information on CSR and the firm performance, we would like to see whether these demographic variables may become moderators and moderate the relationship between CSR and firm performance. So that is our next research question. Further on, let's look at the literature about small tourism enterprises' social responsibility and the firm performance. For tourism businesses, only one study found the positive impact of enterprise performance of support from small businesses for the community. And so very little research has been looking at these aspects of the small business performance issues. And for other sectors, other industries, the results are mixed. There are diversified results about different dimensions of community social responsibility. So we would like to verify what are the dimensions in the tourism context. When we look at the small tourism enterprises' social responsibility towards community, what are those key aspects and the dimensions? And the theoretical support for looking at small tourism enterprises CSR is from the enlightened self-interest view or the social capital theory. So basically, the enlightened self-interest view explained the reason some businesses, including small businesses, for them adopting CSR strategy basically is to serve their own interests because they feel they can gain especially some financial return from such an investment into the community. And the social capital theory basically explains there are different types of capitals that a firm may have and need, including financial capital and social capital, cultural capital, human resource capital, so on and so forth. So the social capital basically refers to the good relationship and network with other businesses or with the community. So exercising CSR is very important for local community, for the local small business firms to gain some social capital. And the social capital will help the company to perform well in the future. So these are the two theories to explain why small enterprises may exercise corporate social responsibility, especially towards the community. So in this study, we would like to explain what is the impact of social responsibility towards community on small tourism enterprises' performance, and what are the dimensions, and whether these different dimensions of CSR towards community have different impacts on the small tourism business performance. So these are the questions we'd like to answer. Now let me focus on the upper echelon theory and its potential application into the small tourism enterprises context. So the upper echelon theory basically explains the executives of a big company, the executive board, they act on the basis of their personalized interpretations of the strategic situations that they are facing. So that means the higher senior management team, their values, their personalities, their experiences will affect those big companies' strategies. So these personalized construes are a function of the executive's experiences, values, and personalities. So upper echelon theories basically explain that the very small number of senior management team members, their personalities or personal values or experiences, so these affect the personalized construes. These affect the decision on the corporate strategies and then further affect the corporate performance. So that is the upper echelon theory. Well, the small tourism enterprises provide a very good example for applying this upper echelon theory, but so far there has not been any evidence before our study. So when previous researchers looked at the small tourism enterprises' performance or their CSR behavior, they didn't apply the upper echelon theory. So upper echelon theory basically was applied in the big companies context. But as we just explained, the upper echelon theories basically focus on the individuals or the senior managers' personalities, values, and some other demographic variables like your educational backgrounds. And these are quite applicable to small tourism enterprises. When we look at the entrepreneur's background, personality, so on and so forth, then we can also explain how their business perform and whether their business adopt the CSR strategy. So what can our findings contribute to the theories of upper echelons? So we try to use our study empirical case to verify that upper echelon theory can be applied not only in the big companies context, but also in small tourism businesses contexts. So based on our literature review, we developed the following research hypothesis, and then we are collecting data and we test our research hypothesis. So the first hypothesis is social responsibility towards community promotes small tourism enterprises' subjective performance significantly. So the first hypothesis link CSR towards community and the firm's subjective performance. Subjective performance is the owner's self-evaluation, whether the business performance met their expectation, whether they are satisfied with the performance. So these are the subjective measures of a performance of a small business. The second hypothesis focuses on the association between social responsibility towards the community and the small tourism enterprises' subjective performance is moderated by the gender of the owner. So the first hypothesis look at the main effect between CSR on community and subject performance. The second hypothesis further look at the impact of gender. Now, we classically know female owners tend to be more interested in engaging with community, and they tend to be friendly with local people and have a good relationship. Or female entrepreneurs, they tend to show goodwill. They are more interested in adopting corporate social responsibilities. So we would like to see between male owners and the female owners of the small tourism enterprises, whether there is a difference on the relationship between CSR and subjective performance. Third hypothesis, the association between social responsibility towards community and small tourism enterprises' performance gains strength as the age of the owner increases. So again, we are testing the moderating effect of the owner's age on the relationship between CSR towards community and the performance. Now here we can see normally when owner is getting older, they gain more and more experiences and they are more sensible towards supporting the community. Therefore, we see there might be a positive moderating effect between age and the relationship between CSR and performance. the fourth hypothesis, the association between social responsibility towards community and STE's subject performance is moderated by the owner's birthplace. Now, this is relatively unique to the Chinese context. Now, in China, is the country is very, very big. People often migrate domestically, moving from one place to the other. Therefore, whether you are setting up your business within your birthplace, whether you have a long, well-developed relationship with the community, or you are just a stranger, you came from other places, you just came into this new community, then your tie with the local community might be slightly weak. But if you have a relatively weak tie with the local community, you might be more motivated to consider building a stronger relationship with the community. So whether the owner was from originally this region or a different region, this may affect their CSR and the further impact on performance. Number 5, the association between social responsibility towards community and STE's objective performance is moderated by the ethnicity of the owner. So here we focus on the ethnicity as one demographic variable of the small business owners. This is also unique to the Chinese context. China is a multi-ethnic, has multiple ethnic groups. There are more than 50 ethnic groups living in China. And the location for our data collection for our fieldwork is located in southwest of China, which has a number of ethnic minority groups settling down in those regions. So this means the main ethnicity group, which is the Han group, the largest ethnic group in China. We compare between that group and the local ethnic minority group. In general, the historical background in China is normally people living in the small ethnic groups, especially in the rural areas of China, they tend to be less educated than people living in the central area from the main ethnic group, the Han group. Therefore, we feel the ethnicity might be related to their education and the capability of running a business. That's why we relate this ethnicity factor with the objective performance. So in general, we feel maybe the Han owner, so the owners from the main ethnic group, they may perform better because they are better educated and they have more experiences of running businesses. Therefore, their financial performance might be better. So this is what we are going to test in this study. So the birthplace and the ethnicity, these two factors are new. We mentioned in the literature, some people use the upper echelon theory to explain the corporate social responsibility. They considered the owner's demographic information, but they haven't considered these two factors. So these are new and unique to the Chinese context. Lastly, the association between social responsibility towards community and the STE's performance is moderated by educational level of the owner. So education means the capability, the competence of managing a firm, a small business. So this may also affect the relationship between CSR and performance. Now let's look at the measurement of the key variables and the constructs. When we look at the firm performance, we have the subjective or the non-financial indicators. Firstly, realizing my business expectations. So the current performance of the business met my initial expectations. So this is the one self-evaluation by the owner. And the second question, degree of satisfaction of the current job. So I'm working for my own business, I'm running my business, and I'm satisfied with the business, with the performance of the business, and with my management of this company. So these two indicators are the subjective measures of the firm performance. Then we have three classical financial indicators as the objective measurement of performance: the before tax profit, return on investment, and the percentage of the repeat businesses. And these variables are also all from the previous literature. The second aspect is about the social responsibility towards community. So there are different indicators, and soon I'm going to explain the dimensions between them. So these questions are all from the previous literature, such as trying to buy materials and goods from locally, even though this will cost more. So this is show the goodwill. The owner is keen to build a good relationships with the community. So they basically source the materials from the local community, even though they are more expensive. Second, supporting and attending important local social festival events. So attending some local events, showing your support to those local big events. That is second aspect. Thirdly, promoting community development through donation. The community may want to build a school, so you donate some money to this project. That is another aspect of CSR towards community. Hiring employees from the local community, that's the next one. And cooperating with the community to keep public security, so to maintain a good order and the whole community safe, so they coordinate with the community. So that is also another aspect of CSR. Complying with business ethics, avoiding cutthroat competition, and operating with business integrity. So also, maintain a harmonious relationship with other local businesses. Don't have this over competition between each other. So these are all the different aspects of social responsibility towards community. And in terms of the characteristics of the owners, we mentioned gender, age, education, the birthplace, and ethnicity. And then we have a number of control variables to control the impact on the firm performance, including the number of employees, the bed spaces, how many beds you have in your small B&B, and the initial investment into this business. So these are basically the control variables to control the size of the firm. So these are the photos of the fieldwork place. They are in southwest of China, in Yunnan province and in Guilin province. You can see it's a beautiful landscape, and these are the classical the home inns, or we call B&Bs in Europe. So these are the businesses they are running. So they rented their properties and converted it to some accommodation and then rent to tourists. So that's the type of business they are running. So we collected the primary data through the face-to-face interview survey from two historical cities famous for heritage tourism. One is called Dali, the other is Yangshuo. And Dali is in the Yunnan province, Yangshuo is in Guilin province, both in the similar region, southwest of China. Especially Yangshuo is a pioneer in China and is best known in China by the international tourists. So this destination, Yangshuo, is a town, is a rural area. It was spotted and discovered actually by Western backpackers in the 1980s, before it became a popular destination for both domestic and international tourists. It was just a rural area. Then some Western backpackers came to the area and they really liked the area, the environment, very clean, very peaceful. And then they even set up some businesses there. So still nowadays in the high street of this small town, you see a number of Western pubs, restaurants. They are still run by some Westerners. So this is one of the earliest or a pioneer tourism destination within China being developed and discovered by international tourists rather than domestic tourists. There is a relatively large share of small inns in both cities, Dali and Yangshuo, and these small businesses have good relationship with the local community. So there were 154 small businesses being interviewed, and the data were collected through the face-to-face interview. So the students from my research partners at university, they spent a few weeks basically visiting each of these small businesses and sat together with the owner, and they went through the questionnaire face-to-face. We finally got 154, including 47 from Dali and 107 from Yangshuo. In terms of the methodology and the model we are running, so we use regression analysis. There are two models, basically. The first model is the baseline model. So the performance is the dependent variable. And here we run twice. Once we use subjective measure of the performance as dependent variable, and the second time we change that to the objective performance indicator. And the RESLC means the social responsibility towards local community. And we have multiple indicators there. We calculate the factor score, and we use the factor score as the measure of this variable. And the control variables include, we mentioned already, the number of bed place, number of employees, and the initial investment. And in the second model, we further put in the moderators. We would like to test the moderating effects. So the DC is the demographic variables, including gender, age, education, ethnicity, and the native place or the birthplace. So these are the dummy variables, and you can see they are multiplied to the corporate social responsibility towards the community. And we are looking at the moderating effects. So this is the general descriptive statistics of our sample. Looking at the age distribution, 1/3 of them age 31 to 40, 45% 21 to 30. So the owners are relatively young. So this is the age. In terms of the native place, so we have 42% from the local area and 17% from the province of this place, but not from the same town. So it's out of this town where they run the business, but still in the same province. We also see about 40% of the owners were from other provinces. So they migrated into this place and they run this small business here. In terms of the education, junior school or lower, 12%, and the majority of them are the bachelor degree, so relatively highly educated. Second highest group is the high school level education. 30% of owners have the high school diploma, and 30% have the bachelor. They finished the university level education already. In terms of the ethnicity, as I mentioned, Han is the major ethnic group in China, and 70% of the owners in our sample came from the Han ethnic group, and the other 30% came from the local ethnic minority group. In terms of the gender distribution, is relatively even, 49% of male versus 51% of female. So as I mentioned, the native place and the ethnicity, these are the two new factors unique to the Chinese tourism small enterprises. This is the factor analysis. I mentioned the corporate social responsibility towards community has multiple dimensions. We have 6 questions, and we run the exploratory factor analysis, and we identify the 2 factors. So the factor 1 is about the community engagement, including the 2 questions. One is supporting and attending local important social festival events. The secondly is promoting community development through donation. So you can see these 2 actions are the major events. So the support to the community through some major events. The second factor is the daily operation. We call it operational support in terms of buying materials from local business, hiring local employees, and maintain cooperating with the community to keep the public security, and lastly, keep a good relationship with other businesses on the daily basis. So these four variables are related to the day-to-day operation. Well, the first two are some major one-off events. So two different types of supports to the local community. In terms of the performance, we mentioned we have the financial indicator as the objective measure and the non-financial indicator as the subjective measure. So these are the factors, and the factor scores will be used to run the regression analysis. So here we have a number of models. The left-hand side, we have the non-financial performance or the subjective performance as the dependent variable, the first four models. And the first model is the baseline model. We only include the two dimensions of CSR. The first one is the community engagement. The second one is the operational support. And you can see both of them are significant in terms of explaining the small businesses, the subjective non-financial performance. Then we further put into the different demographic variables. We look at the moderating effects, and here you can still see some significant moderating effects. Okay, so those in the boxes are the significant effects. So on the right-hand side, we have the financial indicator to measure the objective performance as the dependent variable of the models. And again, the two aspects of the CSR have some significant impacts, particularly the first dimension, the support to the major events we call the community engagement. So the community engagement CSRCE, the first variable, significant in most of the models. While the second dimension, the CSR operational support, only have significant effects on the subjective measure, but they do not explain much of the financial successes. So by hiring local employees or by outsource buying materials of food and wines from the local community, even though they are more expensive than buying from other places, this did not contribute to the financial success. So which means you can explain these are some kind of financial cost, because they have to, in order to keep a good relationship with the community, they have to buy food and wine from the local community, but they are more expensive. Therefore, their profit margin is reduced. Therefore, doing so will not contribute to the financial performance. So that is the interpretation. We look at the moderating effects. First, gender. The negative sign means the female owners tend to be more engaged with the community, and they have positive contribution to the non-financial subjective performance. So gender have a significant moderating effects, and the female owners tend to be more positive, more supportive to community engagement. Looking at the age as a moderator, we can see relatively older age, 31 to 40. Remember, the overall, the age of the owner is relatively young, and the 31 to 40 has the positive impacts on the CSR community engagement. And if we look at the birthplace, the performance, the native place, whether the owner were originally from this area or not. So here you can see the negative sign, which means if the owner was from the other places, then there's a negative impact. And on the financial aspects, actually you can see is a positive impact. So people, the owners from other areas, actually, they tend to work hard in terms of engaging with the community, and there's a positive contribution to the financial performance. Let me show these results on some graphs. So the first one is the moderating effects of gender. The graph shows clearly the female with the red boxes, the red dots, the solid line. This shows for the relationship between CSR, community engagement, and non-financial performance. The slope is steeper. So it means the female owners tend to perform or more interested in performing CSR community engagement and to contribute more to their non-financial performance. The second is about the birthplace. So for the dot lines, it represents outside of the province, and the solid lines represents within the province. So if the owner was from this area, if they were born in this area, then they tend to have CSR, more CSR, and more financial, more positive impacts on the non-financial performance. So the more place attachment of the local owner, then they are more satisfied with their performance. So this basically explains the place attachment. When we are looking at the ethnicity against the financial performance, the result is very evident. So the owner from the major Han ethnic group, they basically have much stronger performance of CSR and leading to the significant positive impacts on their financial performance. So different from the other small ethnic minority groups, the Han enterprises, they have to take more socially responsible activities to build a strong connections with the local community, because the local community basically is full of the ethnic minority group residents. Therefore, they need to work harder and build a relationship with them. Then finally, we look at the age. So we also see a positive impact between the of the older owners on the relationship between CSR and the financial performance. So the solid line represents the non below 30, i.e. above 30. So for the dot lines, they are the groups below 30. So the solid line representing the older owners, and you can see the older owners has the more positive impacts of CSR on financial performance. And the similar results can be also disclosed on the other two groups, the financial and the non-financial performance. So this means the older the owner, the more positive impacts of CSR on the performance, both subjective and objective performance. So to conclude this study, we look at the diversified dimensions. There are two separate dimensions of social responsibility towards community. And we found that they have different impacts on small tourism enterprises' objective and subjective performance. So basically, the first dimension, community engagement, has more positive impacts and significant impacts on performance, while the daily support, the operational support dimension only affects the subjective performance, but not the financial performance. Secondly, we found some significant moderating effects of owners' demographics on the consequences of community engagement. Thirdly, the contribution to the upper echelon theory. So we applied the upper echelon theory, which was classically used for business company CSR studies. For the first time, we introduced that theory to explain small tourism enterprises, their corp CSR behavior. So this is our contribution. We enlarged the applicability of upper echelon theory from the big companies into small businesses contexts. And unique to this study and to the Chinese context, we found the ethnicity and the birthplace, these two demographic variables of the owners have significant moderating effects. So we further verified the moderating effects of owners' demographic information. So that is the contribution of the study. In terms of the practical implications, public policies should be formulated to encourage small tourism enterprises to participate in the local activities, because we found the significant positive effects by participating in some events or donating to some local projects. These activities will help local small businesses to be more successful. In terms of the limitations of the study, we only managed to gather 154 small businesses information through our primary data collection. So the sample size is relatively small and only from 2 regions in southwest of China. So this is the limitation in terms of the representativeness of the sample to the whole Chinese national small tourism enterprises. And also, therefore, the findings may not be able to be generalized to the much broader context. Therefore, it means we still need to conduct further empirical study to look at these relationships in different regions, in different contexts, in order to draw more robust conclusions. So this is the end of the first study. Lauren, shall we have a break, or shall I deal with some questions before we go to the second, or what would you prefer?
Or you can continue if you want, Gang. It's okay for us. Yes, we are focused on your presentation, so let's go. It's perfect.
Okay, good. Okay, let's continue then.
But it's for you. If you need a break, we can do it.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I just wonder whether any students or colleagues would like to have a break.
Everybody is concentrated, so it's okay.
Yeah. Okay, then let's continue. So we have already had some background knowledge of the case already in the first study. So now I'm leading you into the second study with a unique angle and the focus. So the second study focus on the performance of the lifestyle-oriented small tourism enterprises. So this study has been published in Journal of Travel Research. So let me again start with the background, why we want to study this topic. So the lifestyle motivation is relatively new for an individual to consider becoming an entrepreneur and run their own business. So the booming of the lifestyle entrepreneurship is evident in recent years. And this is a new social phenomenon as well as a business model. The lifestyle-oriented motivation, LOM, this type of entrepreneurs, they have unique characteristics. They have different goals from the traditional entrepreneurs. So they basically valuing much more a certain lifestyle than a firm's profit. So for people who decide to run a business because of the lifestyle choice, they do not necessarily pursue maximize the profit. So making money is not the #1 priority. They are happy to sacrifice some of the profits in order to maintain and pursue some type of lifestyle, mostly the relaxing lifestyle. So different motivations of entrepreneurs, we can see the entrepreneurs may run a business because of multiple motivations. So you may still have a lifestyle-oriented motivation, and at the same time, you may still want to pursue certain level of profit margins, and there might be some other reasons. So we accept that entrepreneurs run businesses because of multiple different motivations. Sometimes there are more than one motivations for one person to decide to run a business. And the different motivations of running a business will further lead to the different conducts of the business. Conducts means their strategies. So this is why we introduced the CSR in the context of lifestyle entrepreneurs. In the first study I mentioned, exercising CSR may mean some additional cost. You need to make a donation, you need to purchase some products from the local community, even though they are more expensive. But if you are a lifestyle entrepreneur, maximizing your profit is not your main concern. You probably are more willing to take out a share of your profit and contribute that to the community. Therefore, we hypothesize lifestyle entrepreneurs or the entrepreneurs with a high lifestyle-oriented motivation are more interested in engaging with the community and exercising their CSR, corporate social responsibility. And the different conduct of the business will further lead to different operational performance. So this is the logic. So this is a very basic description of the lifestyle-oriented motivation. They weight the quality of life or the certain type of lifestyle much heavier than financial profit. So this is the main difference between a lifestyle entrepreneur and a traditional entrepreneur who are more profit driven. So CSR we mentioned already. The CSR has the impacts on the society, and the small businesses interact with the local community and the environment by conducting CSR. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, environment is very important for tourism businesses. Environment for other sectors, they might be just a production factor, but for tourism businesses, especially rural tourism businesses, if you set up a business in the rural area, the rural environment, the natural environment itself is the tourism product. People come to this place just because of the rural, beautiful, green, clean environment. So having engagement with the environment, protecting the environment is very important for tourism businesses. And also from the first study, we learned already small businesses' CSR decisions are driven by the owner's personal value and motivation. This is why we can relate their lifestyle motivation choice with the CSR consideration. We identified some research gaps from our reading of the previous literature. Firstly, the lifestyle business research field. In this field, very few studies have investigated the influence of the lifestyle-oriented motivation on the firm's operation, and it didn't include CSR. So there have been some increasing literature focusing lifestyle businesses or lifestyle entrepreneurship, but they haven't really touched on CSR. And secondly, most of the lifestyle entrepreneurship literature adopt the qualitative approach through some interviews. And there have been very little quantitative research being conducted in this area. So this is the two research gaps from the lifestyle business literature. Second point, from the CSR literature, very few studies focused on small businesses. Our previous study is one of the exceptions. So most CSR literature focused on the listed companies, the big companies or the international groups. Secondly, the impacts of the lifestyle-oriented motivation on the firm's CSR has not been tested empirically. So we see the gap on both sides of literature. The lifestyle literature did not consider CSR. The CSR literature has not considered the lifestyle motivation. Therefore, these two research fields become relatively isolated. And through our study, we hope we can bridge these two fields through one empirical design. And we particularly focus on hospitality and tourism sector, and this sector provides a perfect context to study enterprises with lifestyle-oriented motivation. Probably you can also look around. You may have friends, relatives, and even your family members who decided to run a tourism business, a restaurant, or a small B&B or Airbnb, because of the lifestyle choice, not necessarily because you want to make the highest profit. So there have been a number, many such businesses in tourism and hospitality context. So our main research question is, what are the connections between lifestyle-oriented motivation of small tourism enterprises and the firm's CSR behavior, performance, and their intention to sustain, to continue their business operation? So these relationships are the key focus of the second study. So let's look at the literature together. The lifestyle-oriented motivation and the CSR conducts. So I mentioned in the previous slide, the literatures on both fields are relatively isolated. They have not touched each other. And we learned from the previous paper that the entrepreneur's personal motivation, the personal characteristics may affect their CSR activities, but there have not been any literature, any study that illustrates the impacts of lifestyle-oriented motivation on CSR. And the lifestyle entrepreneurs, they are looking for closer relationship with the natural environment. They don't want to live in a metropolitan city like Beijing, Shanghai, which are very heavily polluted. They would like to move to the southwest of China, in this rural area with very clean air, very peaceful atmosphere. So this can be a lifestyle choice. So we want to see whether this lifestyle choice automatically make them more interested in engaging with natural environment, protecting the local environment, because this is what they are pursuing. And also at the same time, they want to maintain a good relationship with the community. And so the stress, they highlight the social worth rather than the material wealth. So people who set up a business, not for the main purpose of making profit, they will not pursue or focus on material wealth, the money, the profit. They are interested in interacting with nature, interacting with the local people. This is what they are pursuing as their lifestyle choice. So CSR, we give the definition already. We know that it is about the consideration of the society and the environment. And you can now see the lifestyle entrepreneurs really have high intention in engaging with CSR. So we now can develop our first hypothesis. The lifestyle-oriented motivation has a significant impact on the small tourism enterprises CSR conducts. And here, in the first study I mentioned, there are multiple dimensions of CSR. In this study, we include all of them. So in the first study, we only consider the community dimension. Now we consider 5 dimensions, including the product dimension, environment dimension, community dimension, employee dimension, and related to tourism context, the heritage related dimension. So these are the 5 dimensions CSR. We would like to test each of them in relation to the lifestyle-oriented motivation. Now let's continue the literature review and the hypothesis development. Second point, we are looking at the lifestyle-oriented motivation and the firm performance and the long-term intention to maintain and continue the operation of the business. So the ultimate intention of lifestyle entrepreneurs is to improve and sustain their lifestyle, regardless of the profit of their business. So therefore, different from traditional entrepreneurs, if their profit margin did not reach a certain level, they may not decide to continue the business. They may decide to just take their money and they transfer the investment into other business opportunities. But for lifestyle entrepreneurs, doesn't matter whether the profit is very high, as long as I can make a break even, I probably would like to stay in this business because this is my lifestyle choice. What I pursue here is the beautiful environment and the harmonious neighborhood and good relationship with the community, not money. So this is the difference. Second point, it's important to evaluate the performance according to the small business owner's own intentions. Again, this is very important for the lifestyle entrepreneurs. As I mentioned again and again, having high profit margin is not their number one priority. So the self-evaluation, whether they are satisfied with running the current business, whether the current performance of the business met their initial expectation for those lifestyle entrepreneurs. These are very important measures of small enterprises performance. So here again, as with the first study, we introduced both the subjective measure and the objective measures. The subjective measures such as personal satisfaction, I mentioned already, and the satisfaction, the expectation, they are more appropriate for measuring lifestyle entrepreneurs' performance. Therefore, we have the second hypothesis. The lifestyle-oriented motivation has significant influence on the small tourism enterprises' overall performance. And here, because we introduced the two different measures of performance, we further have two different sub-hypotheses. And the third hypothesis is the lifestyle-oriented motivation has a significant influence on the small tourism enterprises' intention to sustain the business operation. Because the reason for running this business is a lifestyle choice. Therefore, I'm keen to continue the operation in the long term, sustain the operation, even though or regardless of the financial performance. Now let's look at the mediation of CSR on the relationship between the lifestyle-oriented motivation and the performance. So according to the resource-based view, the implementation of CSR could improve firms' competitive strengths and generate diverse benefits. Little has been known about the influence of CSR on the performance of small businesses, especially tourism small businesses. And our previous study was one of the very few exceptions. So this is the mediation effect of the CSR. So we can develop the hypothesis. CSR mediates the relationship between lifestyle oriented motivation and the performance of small tourism enterprises. And the individual dimensions of CSR, including all of the 5 dimensions, they all have significant impacts on the objective performance of small tourism enterprises. This is our first. And the second one, they all have significant impacts on the subjective performance. So we have 2 separate hypotheses because of the 2 different measures. Then we have number 5 hypothesis. Performance mediates the relationship path from the lifestyle-oriented motivation to small tourism enterprises' intention to sustain the operation. So this is another mediation effect. And again, we have 2 sub-hypotheses because of the 2 different measures of performance. So this is the theoretical model, and we can see all of the hypotheses there. So lifestyle-oriented motivation have direct impacts on CSR, on performance, on the long-term sustained operation intention. And then further on, the CSR will affect the performance, and the performance will further affect the intention. In other words, CSR is a mediator between the IOM and performance, and also performance is a mediator between IOM and the long-term intention. So that is the model. The field study is the same as I mentioned, from the southwest of China, beautiful historical towns, some historical heritage sites you can see, and you can see the peaceful environment, very much suitable for a lifestyle entrepreneur to decide to settle down here and to run their business. very, very beautiful, peaceful, clean. And these are the businesses they are running, the small inns or B&Bs. And this is how our fieldwork was conducted. So our research assistant, the students, they basically visited each of the small businesses and sat down with the owner, and they went through the questionnaire. So in total, there were 300 such businesses in these two areas. And we basically managed to obtain responses from more than half, 447 in Dali and 107 in Yangshuo. And these are the measures. We have already seen some, but not all. So for the lifestyle-oriented motivation, they are measured by 3 questions. Basically, we are asking the owner why they set up their business here. First, pursuing work-life balance. Secondly, attracted by the local atmosphere and lifestyle. Thirdly, driven by the local friends who share the same values and interests. So these are the 3 measures of the lifestyle-oriented motivation. Then we have 5 dimensions of CSR: the product dimension, employee dimension, environmental dimension, community dimension, which we have seen already, and then heritage dimension, because both sides are the historical towns with some heritage sites. So that aspect of CSR is very important. We also have already seen from the first paper about the objective measure, subjective measure, and the long-term operational intention, whether they would like to sustain their business for a long time. That's the measure of the last construct in this model. So here you can see the CSR is a second-order latent variable. So under CSR, there are 5 dimensions, and each dimension is measured by about 5 questions. Therefore, CSR is a second-order construct or second-order latent variable. Same for performance. Performance has 2 dimensions, objective and subjective, and each dimension is further measured by 3-4 questions. So in this study, in this model, we have 2 second-order latent variables. So we decided to adopt the second-order structural equation model to test our hypothesis. And we use the 2-stage second-order SEM estimation method. So the first stage, we run the model without the second-order latent variable. So we only included the first order, the 5 dimensions of CSR, and the 2 dimensions of performance. So in this model, you don't see one circle, which is called CSR, or another circle called performance. So this is the first stage. For first stage, we only include the first order variables, dimensions. So we have 5 dimensions of CSR, 2 dimensions of performance. Then we run this model. After running this model, we can calculate the factor score, the latent score for each of the 5 dimensions and each of the 2 performance dimensions. And then those latent scores will become the measure in the second stage model. So this is the second stage model. All of these 5 dimensions, we are not using the original 5 variables to measure the product CSR dimension. We use the latent, the latent score, which we calculated from the first stage model. Then, which means the original 5 variables now became 1. Same for the others. So this is the second stage model, which is relatively simple. We don't have a lot of variables, only 5 variables to measure CSR and 2 variables to measure performance. We have control variable, then we have the operational intention in the long term. On the left-hand side, we have lifestyle-oriented motivation. So we run 2-stage structural equation models. This is the results of the first stage. Remember, in the first stage, we only considered the CSR dimensions and performance dimensions. And then we can see lifestyle-oriented motivation has nearly all significant impacts on all different dimensions of CSR. And then the lifestyle-oriented motivation also has significant impacts on the subjective performance. But you can see here, lifestyle-oriented motivation does not contribute to objective or financial performance. This is not significant. As we mentioned, people who decide to run a lifestyle business, they do not pursue the maximized profit. So this motivation do not contribute to the financial success. Further on, we look at the CSR dimension and the performance. And we can see not all of the CSR dimensions contribute to their performance in a significant way. Here we have one significant positive impact from the environmental dimension. So the environmental dimension means they save water, they save electricity, which means financially they save some cost. Therefore, it has positive contribution to the objective or the financial performance. So CSR environmental dimension has positive impacts on financial performance. This is significant. And the other significant impacts is similar to what we've seen in the first study. The CSR community dimension has positive impacts on the subjective performance. So by supporting the community, donating to community, engaging with the community activities, the lifestyle entrepreneurs, they feel happy, they are satisfied with their business. So we also see the positive impact. Then we further look at the results of the second order structure equation model. So we are testing the overall relationship between CSR and performance and the relationship between IOM and the other three. And you can see they are all positive and significant. So all of our key hypotheses were supported by our sample, by our data. Lifestyle-oriented motivation has a positive impact on CSR conduct, and also positive impacts on performance, positive impacts on the long-term sustained operation intention, and CSR has positive impacts on performance. Performance has positive impacts on the long-term operational intention. So all of these relationships are significant. So to conclude, this study make a few contributions. Firstly, from the lifestyle-oriented motivation perspective, this study contributed to the hospitality and tourism literature by empirically detecting the influence of the lifestyle-oriented motivation on the company's conduct. Here we use the CSR. Secondly, from the corporate social responsibility perspective, we identified that the lifestyle-oriented motivation is a driving factor for CSR. So this is new in the CSR literature. Thirdly, we contributed to the hospitality and the tourism literature by identifying the influence of the lifestyle-oriented motivation on small tourism businesses' performance. Here, only the subjective performance. And this is new in the tourism and the hospitality literature. In terms of the limitations and the future research directions, as I mentioned for the first study, the sample size is relatively small, and we only use 2 areas in China to conduct the field work. Therefore, the generalization may not be broad. So we need to continue to survey the small tourism businesses in different areas and to verify the findings again. And also our future research directions can be on different measurement of lifestyle-oriented motivation. So in this study, we use 3 questions and use a holistic measure of lifestyle-oriented motivation. While in the future, we can follow some mainstream lifestyle entrepreneurship literature to adopt the multi-dimensional measurement of lifestyle-oriented motivation and to gain further insights whether different specific lifestyle motivations may have different impacts on CSR and the performance. So that's all from me. And now I would like to just happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Gang, for this huge presentation of your work. It was impressive, and I am quite sure that my students are very lucky to hear you presenting your work. So if you allow me, I have several questions, and more precisely, 4 questions. So first of all, I have a question which relates to the theoretical framework. We all know here the competition theory. I mean the works of Bankston and Koch in 2000. And this author said that competition is entering cooperation with competitors at the same time. So my first question is, to what extent can competition theory be integrated into your work? Because my intuition is that the difficulty is to measure competition. And you propose perhaps a way to do that by focusing on CSR, as the local community is composed of competitors. So what's your opinion, gang, please?
Thank you, Laurent. This is a very good question. So the motivations of these two studies were not really on the inter-firm relationship, the cooperation, competition, co-competition, those relationships. But as I explained, and as you pointed out, the measures of the CSR community dimension, especially the last question, is to maintain good relationship with other local businesses, not involved in the they call the cut-throat or throat-cutting competition. So this is also one of the typical measure of CSR. So if the small tourism businesses are interested in engaging the CSR behavior, probably that means they are not very much keen to be involved in such competition. So this also we see, if they are not really involved in this kind of over competition, then it's a win-win situation. We see from our model, from our results, having the CSR community dimension from the first paper, it has positive contribution to their performance. So I think this is quite an interesting point. And also from the second paper, when we further focus on the motivation of those entrepreneurs, especially the lifestyle entrepreneurs, in the first place, when they decided to set up their small B&B, they didn't aim to gain profit or to steal customers from other people, from other businesses. So this is the lifestyle choice. So by that, it means already they are not keen to be involved in competition, to compete with others. So I think it's a relatively unique context in our research study. The entrepreneurship, the lifestyle entrepreneurs, so they run business, and in this area, which is not kind of in the big metropolitan where there has always been a lot of competition. So the location they chose to settle down and run this kind of lifestyle type of business is because it's peaceful. There's not much competition. Exactly. But to generalize this, I think it is a bigger picture we can see. I think in broader sense, in many other places, even beyond our field sites, tourism businesses, small restaurant B&Bs, those kind of small tourism enterprises, they are small, and also they tend to have a good relationship between each other within the local community. I think probably this is the nature of tourism, hospitality business compared to other type of businesses. So I see this is kind of the win-win situation, yeah.
Yes. Okay, the second question is about the methodological part, even if it corresponds to a particular theoretical perception of performance. So you are familiar with our work in Perpignan concerning the measurement of performance with efficiency.
Yeah.
And which is a way of measuring performance. So do you believe that it is possible to carry out a study into taking into consideration efficiency as being a measurement of performance?
I think it's a great idea, and I see it's a very, very natural connection of using efficiency to measure the performance. And again, I think it makes a perfect sense when we relate CSR with efficiency. Because as we mentioned, the CSR has multiple dimensions. Like from the second study, we proved that the environmental dimension has positive impact on the financial indicators. But that financial indicator can also be replaced by efficiency indicators, because the measurement of the CSR environmental dimension is about saving water. It's about taking better use of the electricity. So these definitely affects not only just the financial profit margin, but also I can see the efficiency issues. And also the employee dimension. Having local employees, this may contribute to the productivity and the efficiency. So I see definitely there is a good potential of replacing the current performance measures by some efficiency indicators.
Okay, thank you. And Nicola has also a methodological question. Nicola, do you want to?
Yes. Thank you, Gang, for your presentation. Just a question about your second paper published in Journal of Territorial Research. You use techniques derived from structural equation modeling. And I would like to know if, do you think it could be interesting to use QCA techniques, qualitative comparative analysis methods, for possible multiple effects instead of net effects?
I personally haven't used the QCA methods by myself, so I can't really answer this question. I know a little bit, but not much. And personally, I haven't done any empirical work with QCA, but I definitely can see, depending on the objectives, certainly as long as the data nature fits the methodology requirements, definitely I think we can see and try alternative methods and to triangulate the findings. And maybe we can even gain different findings and the further insights into it. So like between the two papers, the first paper and the second paper, even though we are based on actually the same questionnaire, so it's a big project, and we decided to separate the big project into two separate papers. And the first paper used a regression-based analysis, and second paper is a structural equation model. So it really depends on the specific objective of that small paper. But I see there's definitely potential, and I see there's a high potential of applying QCA more broadly in tourism and hospitality. I think it's relatively new. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, many thanks again. And I have a question from my students concerning the differences between generations. I mean, X, Y, and Z generation. Don't you think there is a link with the CSR involvement by considering the gap generation in tourism?
Yeah, I'm reading the question.
Okay, I can put the question in the chat because the question is not in the chat. Here, you can see the question.
The gap generation is also an
Yes.
aspect of tourism development. And how could we manage the problem of gap generation in tourism?
Because you talked about gender, age,
yes,
social capital, and what about the generation? What's your opinion?
I think the generational issue is related to the age variable we put in the first paper, because the first paper we didn't really look at the age by numbers. We look at the cohort. So every 10 years is a group. So from there we can see some generational differences already. And I think I agree with the students. There definitely, when we look at the entrepreneurship especially the tourism entrepreneurship, as I mentioned in the second paper, a lot of them are actually running the business not for maximizing the profit. They definitely want to pursue some level of profit, but probably not totally. And this is more the trends towards the younger generation. Mm-hmm. I think probably in the old-fashioned older generations, they are more kind of single-minded, focusing on money, profit. This is number one, because they need money to raise the family. But I think nowadays this has become less a concern. It has withdrawn from the number one priority. I think nowadays people pursue more and more a balance between the life and the work. So I do see the generational changes. Yeah.
Yes. Many thanks for your answer. I have another question, if you allow me, and this question concerns the managerial recommendations of your studies. I mean recommendations for destination management organizations. One of their mission is to ensure the competitiveness of their destination. Yeah. And to do that, they try to develop the abilities, the capacities of companies that are linked to the owners for hotels, restaurants, guest house. Thus, understanding how STA works is crucial. So did you present your results to the local authorities, to local DMOs, or not yet?
This is, as you see from the authorship of the two papers. So basically, this paper is a collaborative work from with the one of the Chinese university, top Chinese universities, Surrey University in China. So they have been engaged with local communities, especially in that area, because some staff members were actually born in Yunnan province. So they have a strong relationship with the local authority. But in terms of whether their recommendations to the local authority have been implemented or not, I have to check with them. Okay. But yes, the field work also got the support from the local authority to facilitate our students' interview with those businesses. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And there is a question from Uyen, which is about culture. And she says that in her opinion, there is perhaps a risk of the application of this result on others' culture. So
very
what's
good.
your opinion?
Yeah, I think the Yan is quite right. For all of the businesses, they are situated in certain culture and economic, even political contexts. Therefore, the findings from one empirical study may not necessarily hold in another empirical context. That is why at the end of the first paper, I raised the limitations of our study. But the usefulness of such studies is to just point out of the directions to test whether in different contexts, whether the relationship will still hold. Because before our study, the relationship between CSR on the community dimension has not been verified in terms of the impacts on performance in the small tourism enterprises context. So this relationship has now been verified in the Chinese context. And I think the same framework can certainly be applied. Although we don't know the findings, we don't know whether the relationship is still significant and the strength, whether it's the same as in the Chinese context or not, but we now have got the theoretical framework. For example, all of our measurement items were from the English literature, and many of them were tested in the Western context. So the measurement of CSR in the community, although we contextualize the question, we collect the data from the Chinese community, but scientifically, the theoretical measurements of those constructs, they were all adopted from the English literature, the Western literature, and tested in the Western context. So I have reasonable confidence that the main relationship would still hold. but it's worth finding, maybe like what is presented in the first paper, unique to the specific empirical context. There might be some new findings. Like I found the ethnicity and the birthplace, those variables of the owners of the small businesses, they matter. They have some significant impacts. So that is unique to that specific research context. When we move the theoretical model into a different context, maybe firstly we need to study about that community, about that context, and see whether there are either different situations that is happening, or there are some new variables unique to that community, which can be further tested in the model and to enlarge, extend the model. I think this is the way we progress our research. Because these two papers are empirical studies, we have to collect data from some empirical cases in the empirical context. But the same as any research, empirical studies, unless this is a global empirical study, we always need to be cautious when we apply the findings. But I think what we contribute to the knowledge and the literature is not just the specific findings. It's the theoretical framework. And that framework can probably be adopted in the broader and the different contexts and to verify again. I think that's probably the process we understand and gain insights into a particular research topic.
Okay, many thanks for your answer, Gang. So I think we do not have other questions, then we can consider that this is the end of this webinar, and I would like then to thank you, Professor Lee, on behalf of the students and all my colleagues in Perpignan for sharing with us your expertise and your researches. So I will stop the recording and ask to the students